podcast, How Stories Shape and Change Our Lives. Thank you all for joining me once again on this very exciting episode, part one of a two-part series in conversation with writer-director Laura Lewis-Barr, talking about storytelling and myth-making and reckoning with symbols and images that strike us powerfully and importantly in the human psyche through creative storytelling. Laura is an award-winning screenwriter, stop-motion filmmaker, and educator. Laura writes comedy features. And as a filmmaker, Laura's focus is on animating fairy tales and mythic stories that explore personal and collective transformation. She is inspired by the work of Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, Jack Sipes, and most especially Marie-Louise von Franz. Laura makes films inside of her basement where she lives in Chicago, and her screening events are filled with heart and questions for the soul. So I'm excited to welcome Laura to this podcast. Laura has exhibited her work in a number of film festivals and does a variation of seminars and workshops for people, one of which specifically we'll be talking about today, as I will be the host for one of them. And that particular workshop is sort of exploring inner work through the avenue of myth and fairy tales through watching the short stop motion films that Laura has created. So working with her artistic work directly. So I invited Laura to come on this episode, these next two episodes today, to talk about her process, to talk about her films a little bit, and to talk about a little bit more about the workshops that she provides and that I will be hosting. And at the end of the episode, I will provide you with a link for information if any of you are interested in joining or signing up for these online workshops. So without further ado, I'm happy to announce part one of my conversation with Laura Lewis-Barr. Okay, thank you. Thank you for meeting with me today to talk about you, talk about your films, and the kind of work that you have been doing with them, and just to learn a little bit more about your background that has kind of led you to this place of what you've been currently doing. So wherever seems like a good place to start.
Thank you, Matt. Well, background is always a great story, origin story.
Yes.
And so I had been reading Marie-Louise von Franz, the Jungian, for decades, and I didn't understand a lot of what I was reading, about half, I'd say. And yet I could sense the healing power in what she was giving me.
Yeah.
And I started to feel myself changing as I started to understand shadow and
Right.
all these other parts. And
what was your impression of shadow from her words that you begin to put together?
yeah, well, I think like I would have a dream about a wolf who's dancing with one of my coworkers.
Yeah.
And I realized I was the wolf. And I suddenly saw how I might be seen by my coworkers in certain situations.
Right.
And that was a huge shock. And reading von Franz about fairy tales and getting all of this archetypal information, it's like it is planting seeds in my psyche that start to grow, but it takes a long time. And I think von Franz's work is so cool because I think it's all lecture, nothing. I don't think she ever wrote anything as a book. I think they all were books created from her lectures.
Okay. Yeah.
And it really shows because she's trying to explain these things that are really hard to explain,
Right.
really, really, really hard. And um, she circles around and circles around. And when I try to explain, even now to you,
Yeah,
words get really in the way.
they do.
It is an experiential, it's
Hmm.
always experiential, and we do our best to explain. Yeah.
And I think that's why she and other depth psychologists begin to understand the power of symbol, right? Like symbol and interaction with symbol could communicate something deeper than our words could ever really put to it, you know?
Yes, and they are irrational.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
And
It,
really embracing what is irrational.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I know I encounter people. I'll just finish my origin story and get to the thought that I have in the
yeah,
moment. So I had been reading von Franz, and at the same time, I started to experiment with stop motion as a filmmaker, and these fairy tales felt like the perfect vehicle for stop motion in terms of their length, in terms of kind of the style.
yeah.
And and then I just fell in love with the whole thing and just started teaching myself stop motion. And I felt like the fairy tales were giving me a goodness to the
Yeah.
story, the bones of the story that I could really lean into.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is, I know for myself and other people, dreams and fairy tales can be very annoying because what the heck?
Well,
What does
yeah,
it
because
mean?
our rational mind wants to always try to make sense out of the irrational or the ego mind, as I sometimes call it, because that's its job. And when we're awake, that's what we're trying to do, right?
Right, right. And so the ego gets annoyed. And
Yeah.
I meet people who are annoyed by these fairy tales, and they don't necessarily, I think, believe that there's any goodness in these crazy. And von Franz often takes like the craziest tale of,
Yes,
you
she does.
know, she'll take a little tale like a bean, like a pinto bean that laughs and explodes itself in laughter. And I'm like, what the heck?
Hmm.
And then she explains what it's about. It's quite amazing. So that's my inspiration is her work.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And do you remember when how you first came across her work? What in what
Mm.
context were you doing? What stage of life? I'm just curious.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I first met Jung probably in my 20s,
Okay.
but it was when I was about 50 that my life fell apart. I lost a job and my theater work wasn't working out and I was in a free fall.
Right.
And I worked at a college and I started doing interlibrary loan and got every single book von Franz had written and just
Okay.
started reading them as
Yeah.
a balm to my soul. And yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful. And I've kind of adopted her as my mother,
Yeah.
the
Right.
mother I
Yeah.
wish I had. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really how I found her. And I think since more recently they've compiled her work and you can buy her work compiled, but this was like hunting and finding these
Yeah.
works on alchemy and these works on a Romanian fairy tale and these works on death and time and she had published a lot or they published a lot under her name.
That
Yeah.
that's important. The process that you went through for wisdom, like a treasure
Mhm.
hunt,
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
And I think that's kind of what, at least in my experience, symbols, irrational things that we can't make sense of, beckon us to if we can allow our curiosity maybe to override whatever frustration we might also be feeling at the same time, right?
To tolerate not understanding. And I have a big toleration for that, a huge toleration for that, maybe because I'm an artist. And I just
Okay.
know that eventually understanding might come, but it could take years.
So you more or less kind of come as an artist by that naturally, or did you kind of have to work at building that tolerance, or
Oh,
combination of both, maybe?
yeah, no, I've always been an artist since childhood, and that's a great blessing and a curse. It's a
Yeah,
calling.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. You've got some history professionally with film or connected to the filming industry in some way, right?
Yeah, well, my background is theater,
Background is theater, that's
and
right.
I got a master's degree. I was going for a PhD. I taught for many, many years
Okay.
and wrote and directed, and the theater was it.
Yeah,
But then one of my scripts was chosen for a film project, and I thought, oh, wow,
yeah.
this thing lasts forever. It doesn't end on opening night. And then when I started making my own little films, there was no gatekeeper. I could do whatever
Mhm.
I wanted. And as a theater artist, working with tons of other people and a lot of gatekeepers, this was a revelation that I could just make
Absolutely.
art.
Right. And just in it, I mean, follow the threads of wherever your own soul's curiosity wanted to lead you,
Exactly.
wanted heated.
Exactly. And it's terrifying because now I have to step into the full ownership and say, okay, I'm going to do this. And maybe no one will like it. Maybe everyone will hate it. And that was a big part of my journey and still
So,
is.
yeah, and to the degree that you're comfortable talking a little bit more about that, I'd like to ask you about it because I can relate to that
Mm.
as an artist myself. So my milieu is more music.
Oh,
I
yeah.
write and produce music, and it's one thing as an artist to spend you know hours behind something, whatever your canvas is, right? Putting it together, carefully crafting it, making it be exactly what you want it to be. And it's this like tiny little child that you're giving birth to.
Right.
And then you want to put it out there and you have absolutely no control
Mm.
over
Mm.
who's going to even choose to respond to it, number one. And
Mm-hmm.
number two, how they're going to respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's huge vulnerability, right?
Huge. Huge.
Really
Yeah.
put your soul out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
What drives you? I guess here's my question. What drives you to do that? What ultimately drives you to risk that level of vulnerability in the art that you put out?
Yeah. My personality is just wired that way, fortunately or unfortunately. I
Mhm.
know artists. I had a friend who painted, and she had these exquisite paintings in her home, but never shared them with the world, never, ever. And I'm a double Capricorn. I guess maybe that's why.
That's what,
But
yeah,
I uh, I always have felt that calling to put it out there and this hunger to be seen,
yeah.
to be heard. And it's a little embarrassing to admit that, but I really do have
But
had that hunger.
yeah, but there is, at least I guess from my point of view, there is something archetypal about that, right?
Mhm.
For all of
Yeah.
us, we want to be seen and we want to be heard, and it's not necessarily for glory or fame or greed. I mean, don't get me wrong, money's nice for the work that we do, but to be seen is that's something special, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess. to me, it's always meant you can play in the bigger game. Like you get to be in a conversation with people in the world and play the game of the world. And
Yeah.
I I'm also sort of a zealot for Jung.
Yeah.
And so the films are one thing, and I've just started a podcast with a friend, and both of them center around symbolic thinking and really kind of for the rest of my life, my goal is to just kind of keep putting that message out there that we so desperately need, that literal thinking is the block that stops us from growth and transformation. And whether it's in religion, which is what my podcast is about,
Mhm.
or just in general living, we get stuck.
Right.
And Jung offered us a way out. So I am a born again Jungian, and
Yeah.
that's part of what motivates me. I think if I was just telling my own story, there would be some motivation, but I think I
Hmm.
have a religious motivation around this work.
Well, to kind of invoke some Jungian language, you feel the collective unconscious. You're connected to
Mm,
it. It draws,
mm.
right?
Yeah, 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 for
Hmm.
sure. And if we think about the hero's journey, I've received so much. I want to bring the boon back. I want to bring, the treasure back to the community.
Hmm.
And that's where I'm at in that. Well, I'm in all parts of the journey, but yeah.
That is immensely powerful. And here's my question for you there. How, well, maybe it's interesting to talk about it from both ends. How do you what does it do for you in your soul when that gold is received?
Mm,
And how do you cope when it's not received or ignored or
mm.
rejected? Because you and I
Yeah.
both know that we can find gold and bring it to people, and they can look at it and go, that's not worth anything, and just walk away from it. And it can, for me, it can feel and has felt devastating.
Oh, for sure.
Curious
Oh,
to
for
hear a little
sure.
more from you. Yeah.
Yeah, my first thought is I did a little film about the inner critic, and that was a very fun film. Gnarly Inside is the name of it. And I bring that up because, unfortunately, when people receive my work and love it, unfortunately, some part of me tends to go, yeah, yeah, I don't believe you.
Right.
Oh my God. And then one person has a problem with my work and I focus on that.
That's the one
Like,
you think about. Yeah.
oh man. So
Yeah.
I I am trying. I think one thing that helps me a lot is to partner with people like you or Jungian organizations
Mhm.
and offer it in partnership. And then I don't feel quite so hanging on a limb,
Right.
hoping that somebody replies.
Sure.
And I think the other thing to say, and I think the medium is really fascinating because podcasting to me is in its heyday. It's sort of fitting a cultural need.
Right.
People love podcasts.
Mhm.
But films are harder. Like I've seen my films play at film festivals, indie film festivals with a crowded audience,
Yeah.
and there is nothing, that experience will stay with me for the rest of my life. It was like the audience reacts with joy and laughter,
Oh,
and I am so overwhelmed with gratitude. But so film is a communal experience, and I put my films out there and hope people will use them. But I think it's a little harder for people always to get into watching a film by themselves,
sure.
especially one that is asking them to do something.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. it makes sense to me that being in a communal gathering, reacting and watching other people's reactions,
Mm.
you know, that's what starts the conversation.
Yeah.
Community
Yeah.
art, yeah, that
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. It's a strange reality that I work on, and I feel called to make these little films,
Mhm.
and and I've questioned that calling for about 5 years, and the call is like, make them, make them, make them. So I
There's
will,
Yeah, because
and
this is what your soul is telling you to do, and you and I both know your soul doesn't give a crap about what the world wants or thinks
mm,
or the the daily realities of life that you have to attend to. If it wants you to
mm,
do the thing, it's not going to leave you alone, right? That's my experience at least.
right. And what I love about film and podcasting is that it lasts out there
Yeah,
in the ether, in the culture, and if people may find it much later, and all I can do, I work on this idea is all I can do is put it out there and do the best I can.
right. I know for me, I've been trying to kind of cultivate in that sense validation on two different fronts. The first is the outward front. And I believe outward validation is important, actually. I think it's
Mm,
good for us.
mm,
It's what, we can say maybe it's one thing to say, I rely on validation entirely outwardly. That's one thing. But I think it's good when we can give ourselves a sense of that, but also receive it from others.
yep,
And so, when we do get those outward hits of validation to treasure them and to have
yep,
gratitude for them and let them be a little bit of fuel to keep us going, right?
yeah,
To the thing that you said just a minute ago about putting it out there, like, okay, my I'm trying to learn how to give myself validation for what my soul is asking me to do
yeah,
because I don't know. And I know this as a therapist too. I have no idea what something I did or said 5 or 10 years ago might actually be important to
right,
somebody, right? We put that out there,
right.
and so that's one of the ways that I've been trying to learn how to grow some validation within myself is that, whatever my soul is asking me to do, it's not just for my benefit alone.
Yeah.
And Joseph Campbell was pretty clear about that in his writing too. It's a gift for the world and for you at the same time.
It's very true. And I think in this world of AI and kind of corporate ownership of media, I think the individual voice is more important than ever. And when you bring up Joseph Campbell, his statement about the machine, fighting against the machine forces is the role of the hero.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
It is so vital.
that's right. So I did want to ask you a little bit to talk maybe about one or two films specifically
Mm.
that you have put out there recently. I've been enjoying watching them and then
Oh,
watching them again. And
thank you.
we're going to give some information towards the end here about some workshops that we want to put out there to work with
Yeah.
your film.
Yeah. Well, I would love to talk about ones that you've watched. Do you
Yeah.
remember any titles that you've watched?
Haha is the one that's my favorite right
Oh, yummy.
now.
Okay, so the title of the film is Dumpling,
Dumpling.
and it's based on a Japanese fairy tale.
Mhm.
And um, yeah, so if people watch my films from the first one, which is The Doctor's Last Day, to Dumpling is my second to most recent, they'll see a big evolution in my work as I
Right.
teach myself how to
Yeah.
use the green screen and even now using some AI tools to make characters speak.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. I noticed that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I think what's fascinating about the films is a lot of times I have only a vague idea of what they mean. Like
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I go in with ideas and then I realize,
Mhm.
and they're usually speaking about something in my life. And dumpling has to do with issues of burnout and issues of how do we give when we're being asked to give and maybe there's nothing to give.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and um,
Well, and
and
how
it
she keeps
has
chasing that dumpling that keeps rolling away.
yes. And for me, that's chasing perfection. And
Yeah.
at the end, she stops chasing perfection.
It's
And
interesting.
it's also about the role of joy and laughter and
Right.
um, our willingness to laugh at ourselves.
Right.
And I hesitate on a level to say what my films mean because I always feel like, well, people should have their own.
Right.
I was in a workshop not too long ago where there was a symbol of milk or yogurt in the film, and one of the participants in the workshop started riffing associations on milk. And
Yeah.
I was amazed because I didn't know any of that. So it is like
Right.
dream work that we all kind of bring our own interpretation.
Sure.
At the same time, I found that sharing what I do know, because I do a lot of research,
Yeah.
can be a help. So I'm kind of, that's a tension
Just
in me.
balancing that. Yeah.
Um, so I just want to say there are many meanings of these films.
Sure.
And dumpling, yeah, it's a really fun.
Yeah.
It has an image that I can't get out of my head, which is this image of descent.
Yes.
And it's almost like Inanna going down into the
Oh,
underworld. Yeah.
yeah. I appreciate you sharing, what what it meant for you,
Mm,
as I think what I noticed coming up in me as I was watching it was
mm,
the dumpling was like kind of the symbol of my soul or my soul
mm,
deepest desire. And
mm,
it kept, it's elusive, but it's also being, trying to be exploited
mm,
by other people, right? And I have
mm.
to, um, because I'm a chronic people pleaser. That's my that's one of my shadow things, right? And
Got
that's
it.
what's coming up with me. It's like, okay, the tension between pleasing the expectations of other people or following what my soul tells me it wants me to do.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that's kind of what came up for me. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And that does remind me of Von Franz and a lot of fairy tales involve chasing a round object or a feather, which is the soul,
Mhm.
and how funny that I wasn't thinking that. But it's really impossible to hold it all in your head anyway.
But this illustrates the power of exactly what you're talking about.
Hmm, hmm,
What symbols do. And you're
hmm,
just following energy. And as
hmm,
you're making the art, the energy is telling you to do this, and you
hmm,
don't necessarily know why, but you
hmm,
follow it, right?
hmm,
I learned
hmm,
this early on with songwriting. The harder I tried to make a song, what my ego wanted to make it, worse
hmm,
it usually turned out. And I had to learn
hmm.
over time to just, okay, yeah, I start with an idea, but once I get started and once it gets going, I have to learn. I have had to learn how to follow where the song wants to go from there.
Oh,
And the more I do that, the better the outcome tends to be, even though
wow.
you didn't maybe intend all of that at the beginning. And then once I was able to kind of feel what that was like, then it started becoming more fun.
Nice.
right? It's like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but let's see.
Nice. Well, I wonder if you can relate to this part of my journey that, I have a limited budget, I have limited tools, and
Mhm.
I make art in a way that can be kind of crude. It's like I'm not Pixar,
Right.
and I think sometimes making the best of the limitation creates an effect that I hadn't anticipated, but I love it later, or it works on some level, this kind of scrappiness.
Yep.
Does that happen in your songwriting?
It does.
Or maybe it's in the recording process
Yeah.
or
I mean, I think, I mean, where technology is now with recording equipment, you people like me without a budget, without the benefit of recording studios and producers and all of that, right, can create something that sounds semi-professional.
nice.
But I do recognize that, I don't like I'm not part of the Foo Fighters, right? Like I can't just go into $1 million
Mm.
studio and sit down with Dave Grohl and a bunch of famous musicians and go through all that. As fun as that doing something like that would be, right?
Yeah,
I've got what's in my limited availability. So for me, what I found is that using what limited resources I have and then just trying to be creative with them in different ways
right.
is kind of fun and kind of good. And I have to say that I really actually appreciate the aesthetic of the films that you produce because it's not something that's just easy to just kind of lay back and, casually watch. I think the aesthetic itself kind of begs you as the viewer to get involved and even if it's just what the hell is going on here? Start, right? You know,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
like
cool.
it. Yeah,
Neat,
absolutely.
neat. Yeah.
But yeah, working with limited uh, tools, it's both. It is a limitation, but it also pushes you to be more creative, at least in my experience.
For sure. I think that's really true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 And that is part one of our two-part conversation with Laura Lewis-Barr. For those of you who are interested in signing up for any of the upcoming workshops where we will be interacting with Laura's short films, please come visit my website at matthewmarkell.com. That's MATTHEWMARKELL.com, and click on the workshops page where you'll find all the information, including the sign up information that you need. And for those who are interested in exploring and learning much more about what Laura does and what she has to offer, I would invite you to visit her website at thefilmshop.org and also psychecinema.com, where she displays her short films to watch for free. And also, Laura has a podcast that she is showcasing on Spotify, which is called The Laughing Mystics, an unorthodox journey through the liturgical year. So please do go check out all of her sites and all of those resources and get to know her and more about what she does, all the wonderful creative offerings that she does and puts out into the world. It will be worth your time, I promise you. So I will be looking forward to coming back here for part two of our conversation with Laura Lewis-Barr. See you then.